Alright, now let's get to drawing the architectural levels. But before we get to that, I'm going to first tell you a few little points. First, I'm going to delete this right here, and then go into an elevation. As you can see here, once again, we've got two default levels, for which we could simply go over here to the AutoCAD plan, and then first take a look at the other levels we have, as well as their offsets and how many they are. And then we're going to go back to Revit and then start drawing them. Okay, so those levels would be the FFLs, which are actually the architectural finished floor levels. So first we're going to draw them, and then we will get to drawing the walls, doors, and windows, etc. But first, here's a point. Imagine that I have already drawn the finished floor levels, as in let's say that we've already got the FFLs here. Then I would naturally begin with drawing the walls, as usually the modeling of the architectural begins with the walls. So let's say that I'm going to be drawing the walls after the FFLs. But actually, here's a question for you. Do you know which level the main or basic walls start from? Like, from which spot or FFL should we start drawing the walls? Do they start from an FFL? As in, do they begin from the architectural floor? Definitely not. We need to draw the basic walls from the slab, which is at the TOS offset. But as you can see over here, we don't have a TOS, and all we've got are the FFLs. So how should we draw the walls? The feet of the wall need to sit on the TOS and not on the FFL. So what should we do now? You might think to yourself that it's actually pretty simple, and for drawing the walls, you could just select the wall command, then choose a negative offset, by, for example, 10 centimeters, which is the difference between the structural and architectural in this plan, and that makes the wall start from the TOS. But even though doing so would actually adjust the elevation of your walls, it's not technically right to do. You see, we usually try our best to not give any random base offsets or top offsets to our items in the projects. In other words, we try not to use any base offsets or top offsets unless it's very necessary. The reason for that is it may cause some trouble if you're working on a big project, because when you try to use a negative base offset, so that, for example, these walls that you're drawing, they would be starting from the TOS, and now let's imagine that for whatever reason, the offset of your walls change. For example, let's say that it is 3, but then changes to 2.80. Okay, so what should you do in that case? The offset is already required to change. After that, you would have to select all of the structural base walls that you've drawn, and then go to their base offset value, which you can find the parameter here, and then change the value by however amount that it is needed. That actually isn't a very ideal thing to do, and you should never really do that on your projects, especially when you're working on the bigger ones, because like I said, it's not technically right to do. I actually even tell that to my students in the classes, that maybe in Revit you might have to close your project, or just finish modeling it and then close Revit. What matters after that is the methods that you use to model the items, and how you finish that project. Because in Revit you could use any way to draw anything. For example, here we just said how we could draw the different offsets, and we also said we could go over here to modify the offset. But that's not right, even though it might work for you, and you might even use that same way to modify your level offsets. On the outside, it might seem that it's accurate, but it's actually not, and you should never do it. So try not to focus all your attention on just modeling your project however possible, just to have something to offer. You need to do the right things to draw your items the right ways, either by the accurate common ways, or ways that can help you speed up your process. Because, for example, if you try to use this base offset way, and then if the base offset is required to change, then you'd have to select all your walls one by using filters, or if it's a title block you can select it, just do it however, which will then once again even include some inaccurate items in your selection, and then you would have to change the base offset of those selected items. But doing so in big projects, for example like this one, for which you can see the structural plan here, that would be very time consuming, and it just doesn't make sense to go that way. So we're gonna put that way aside. We shouldn't go that way, so we won't. What can we do instead? Now you might think that, okay, I'm not going to alter the base offset, but I am going to draw a level. I could just go into an elevation and draw the TOS levels, and not only the TOS ones, but also the FFLs. Then I could have the structural walls start from the TOS and make TOS the base of the walls. And as for the other elements like the finished walls or the architectural floors, as well as even the furniture or anything else, then I would just work with the FFLs. I've got 2 of them over here and I could use them. Now you are thinking right, but it's still not very accurate to do. So despite all of that, it's still not the most accurate way. Now why is that? Once again, it's because of the alteration process. You see, if the offsets of your structural levels are required to change for installation and structural reasons, then what should you do? You would have to first go over to your structural plan and change the levels offsets there, and then you'll have to do that again in the architectural file as well. As in, then you would have to change the offsets in 2 separate files. First in the structural, which would be this file over here, and then once again you'd have to go to the architectural file to change the offsets. Once again, I would say that would be very time consuming. So now let's see what we actually should do. The right thing to do is that you create a monitored copy of your structures. That means that you would have to link your structural plan into the architectural and then copy monitor its levels. Now, if you're not very familiar with copy monitor and how you can do it and how it works, I'm going to also be giving you some explanations while I do it so that you could also learn. But in general terms, what this copy monitor command does is that it copies the structural levels into architectural while also maintaining a connection between the original levels and the copied ones. For example, then if I go over here and then change the offset of one of the levels, then if I go over to the architectural file, I would be notified that, for example, this level's offset has changed in the structural. This structural level that you have copy monitored, its offset has changed. Do you want to update that change of offset in here as well? So this way there would still be a connection between these copied items and the items that you've copied from. This connection between the items is actually constant, and if you make any changes to the items in the structural, if they're copy monitored in architectural, then you would be notified that there have been some changes made to this item that you've copy monitored. Do you want to apply and adapt those changes here? Or not, you could just ignore it. For example, let's say that those changes were made by mistake. Or maybe that change was for testing something. So then in the architectural, it would be up to you to choose whether you want to apply those changes or just ignore them. So do you see how useful this command is? This way, even if you don't have access to the structural plan and someone makes some changes there, or more specifically changes the offset of one of the levels, then you will be notified here that this change has happened. And that's actually very important. So we conclude that the best way to do that is that you copy monitor your levels. Now let's see how we can do it. The first step of the way is that you need to link the plan that you need into your architectural. So right now I need the structural plans levels to use here. So first I'm going to link the structural plan. Now here's the thing about linking plans. You're probably already familiar with linking and this link Revit command, which links a different file into the file that you have at hand. But as for this project over here, we need the 0 points of both files to be the same spot, and basically we need that 0 point for both the structural and the architectural file to be the same. This way they would lay on top of one another, and basically in all projects the 0 points of both files need to be aligned. For example, the 0 point of the structural and the 0 point of the architectural need to be adapted to one another, so that when you link them, they would overlay each other and not mispositioned. Even if they're not, you could later try to align the files together by using the axis, grids, and stuff like that. But the point is that the 0 points need to be the same. Okay, so how do I do that for these files? Here's what I'm going to do. First, I'm going to go over here and try to insert one of these architectural levels into one of Revit's architectural plans. The level in which we need to draw most of the things is the ground level, which happens to include a lot of the things that I'm going to be telling you, and we're going to be working mostly on this level for draw in the walls, doors, windows, staircases, and every other item it needs. And then for some other things, we might need to focus on the other levels to gather more complete information. So since we're planning to work on the ground level, I'm going to try to insert this ground level into Revit. Let me separate it from its sheet, then Control C. Then I'm going to go over here and hit Control V. Okay, now I'm going to try to explode it several times so that if there are any blocks over here, they wouldn't bother me in Revit. And also I'm going to adjust its 0 point. Now, what was the 0 point that we chose? It was in fact the intersection of the first two grids. So that would be the intersection of this grid with this grid. Am I right? This intersection is our spot. Now I'm going to head to the architectural file to show you something. As you can see in the lower levels, like the basement ones, there are columns on these grids. But then when we go up to the ground level, those columns are kind of gone. And then for the intersection of the grids, we could take the intersection of B and 2. That's in case if we want to start from here. But since in the structural we've already assigned A and 1's intersection as the 0 point, you would need to do the same thing here. So I'm going to go over to this plan and select the whole thing, then press move. And then I'm going to take the intersection of these two grids over here, which is this spot. And then in this field, I'm going to type 0, 0. Now it's moved over here. Now also I'm going to double check its unit, even though we do know that the units are both the same. So I'm going to measure a distance here. For example, the stair step. Measure from here to here, which gives us 0.3. So we figured that this is in meters. Now let's save it. In this folder over here, DWG to Revit. And then for the name of this file, I'm going to, for example, write ground floor. Let's also add arc at the end and save. Okay, now that we've saved the file, we're going to go over here and import the plan. I am aware that the levels aren't adjusted yet, but for now I'm just trying to align the 0 points. So I'm going to go over here, import cat, then I'm going to find that file. And in the settings, I'm going to keep it on current view only to import it only here. Import units was meter. And for the positioning, I'm going to keep it on origin to internal origin. This one also helps to make the 0 points to be the intersection of those two grids that I told you. So now we import it. Now you see in Revit's newest version, the intersection of these two reference planes that you see over here actually makes for the 0 point of your project. Do you see the reference planes here? You can see that the intersection of them is right on the intersection of the grids that we chose. Alright, now I have imported my CAD plan. So next I'm going to go over here, select Link Revit, and I'm going to also link the structural plan. For example, this file over here is the one that we worked on and drew one of its levels. Now down here for its positioning, I'm going to select internal origin to internal origin, and then I'm going to click open. So now you see that our structural plan has been linked, and you might also notice that it's been positioned right onto that CAD file that we imported earlier. So basically, I have imported one CAD plan from AutoCAD. Then for its positioning, I selected origin to internal origin. Now also the intersection of those two grids was the 0 point, which was what we needed to be. So now when I link the structural plan into architectural, and then once again for the positioning, I select internal origin to internal origin, then those intersections would fall upon each other, just like what you can see over here, and then you can easily continue. So that's about how you can align your file 0 points together. Now as for that full structural plan, which I'm planning to link to use over here, has a different 0 point. That file's 0 point is the intersection of two other grids. And actually, let's just go and take a look at it. So I'm going to go over here and open the structural plan. And now, do you see these symbols over here? This is actually the project base point and survey point. currently it is positioned on the intersection of grid 12 and grid 1. So this project's 0 point is at 12 and 1's intersection. Now you might think to yourself that we could just reposition these 0 points, as in I could move this base point over to this intersection over here and then link the plan, which actually is something that you can do. But if you try that and then go to link the plan, for example over here, if you select it, then you shouldn't position your plan at internal origin to internal origin. Instead, you could choose project base point to project base point, which would place both of the project's base points on top of one another. For example, I'm going to go over here, over to the structural file, then select this project base point. But also remember that if you couldn't see it, you could just press VG and then expand the site category, then check the project base point and survey point. So then you could go over here and select the project base point and then select move and try to move it from there up to the intersection over here. Remember that moving the project base point and survey point is actually a little risky, so remember that in some cases you should not do that at all. And the reason why I'm doing it right now is to show you that it's possible and how it is done. Now I'm going to also synchronize it. And then I'm going to link this plan into the architectural. We're going to go over here, link Revit, then select the structural plan, and also we're going to open the positioning drop-down, then select project base point to project base point, and then click OK. This message isn't really that important. And so as you can see over here, once again the 0 points are aligned. So this is also another way of doing it. Or you could also go back to your main CAD file, then change the 0 point to the intersection of 12 and 1, or wherever else. So those were the two ways of aligning the 0 points. Now we're going to move on to save time. Okay, so I have linked the structural plan. And now if I go over to an elevation, for example, let's open this one. Here you can see that we have the structural levels. These are the structural levels from the link. Now I'm going to go over here to remove the scope box. Not to mention that the problem we have with this new 2025 version is that all views have scope boxes. Okay, so like I said, here we have the structural levels. And if you remember, we also said that you could copy monitor some items from the structural plan, which again, as we said, creates a connection between the main item that you're copying from and what you've copied from it in a different file. The connection between those main items or elements and their copy monitored version is constant, and if any changes are made into the structural plan, you will be given the choice to apply those changes into architectural or not. So let's go copy monitor. You're going to go over to the Collaborate tab, and then find an option here called Copy Monitor. If you click to open its drop-down, you will see two options. First one is Use Current Project, which we're going to skip, and the other is Select Link, which is for when we want to copy some elements from a link. So if we click Select Link, then we would have to click to pick that link. So I'm going to click here, and then the link is selected. Once you do that, a new tab will be added here called Copy/Monitor. Once you're in this tab, you could go over here and click on Copy, and then you're going to go over here and click on the levels. So you see when I click on this one, it's going to copy this level into the architectural. Let's wait for the process to finish. And then this is what you will have. Let me go copy another one, for example this level. Click, and it'll be copied. Now to select and copy multiple levels, first we're going to have to check this multiple box, and then drag over the rest of the levels. Then go over to the filter, and only check the levels, then click OK. Let's double check. Only keep the levels selected, and then first we're going to have to click on the Finish button over here, and then the Finish green check mark, meaning that when you're using multiple copy, after you have selected the levels that you want, then you'd have to click on Finish here to copy them first. Okay, so our levels have been copy monitored. So I'm going to click on Finish, And now let's see how we can check the levels. It's pretty easy. We're gonna go over here and hide the link temporarily. And now you can see the levels have been created. Let's also go over here to enable heads for them. And so now these will make for the TOS levels, which have been copy monitored from the structural plan into the architectural. Also, when you select them, you can see these symbols on top of them, and these symbols indicate that these selected elements are copy monitored and they are connected to another file. So if any changes are made to that main file, you will also be notified here. So now I can go ahead and add the levels. I'm going to go over here to New Structural Plan, and then I'm going to select all of the levels that I've copy monitored and add them to the project. Let's go here to the subdiscipline, and here they are now. So you could very easily copy monitor your levels from structural to your architectural plans in order for them to also be constantly connected, and in case there's a change in offset in the structural plan, then you wouldn't need to worry. You could also apply those changes into architectural because Revit will notify you and give you the choice. So there goes the copy monitoring. Now you could use that command for your levels as well as for your grids. That way you wouldn't need to draw all of your grids one by one. Instead, you could just copy monitor them. For example, I'm going to go over to this view in which I've imported the CAD file. And here we have two options. We could either use pickline to draw every single grid one by one, or we could just use the copy monitor command instead. Now, how do we use copy monitor? Once again, we would have to go over to the Collaborate tab, drop down Copy Monitor, then select Link, then click to select the link you have, click Copy with the multiple box checked, then drag over your entire plan, then go over to the filter and only check the box for the grids. Now we're going to click on the Finish button here first to copy monitor the grids. And once the process is done, we're going to go to this tab again, then click on the Finish green check mark. Now, if we once again try to hide the structural link, then you can see that the grids have also been copied into our file. So you could very easily use the Copy Monitor command to copy all of your grids and levels. Also, you could draw your grids manually if there aren't too many of them, but as for the levels, it is best that you use Copy Monitor to make them connected to the levels that you have in the structural. But again, you could use that command for copying the grids to make the process move on faster. Now, I want to also tell you an important point. You see, we've come this far and copy monitored some items, and by the end, we link all of our files together. So now imagine that we have the structural link here as well. Now you see, if I try to make some changes to the structural grids, you can still see the grids from the structural file under them. That also applies to the copied levels. For example, if I go over here and try to extend the levels in the structural file, and then also unhide the structural link, you can see that we still have the levels from the structural link in the view. Now, this may cause some trouble when you are trying to draw some things in your plans, and basically these levels shouldn't be visible in the structural file. Neither should the grids. They should only be visible in the architectural. Now, how can we do that? Pay close attention to what I'm about to tell you. If you are using a central file, as in if your file is central, that would make your work a lot easier, because then you could very easily go over to turning off the work set that contains these levels and grids in the structural file and make the work set invisible in the architectural. So how can we do that? We're going to have to go over here, then select our link, right-click on it, and then select Manage Work Sets. Now over here you can see the work sets that you have for the structural link. And now what I'm about to do is I'm going to turn off the grids and levels work sets. I just want to make them invisible. How do we turn it off? First, we're going to have to select the work set like this, then go to the right side of the window and select Close. Now you can see Opened has changed to No, and if I click Open again, it'll be Yes, and Close makes it No. Now we're going to reload it. I'm going to click OK for this. And now, as you can see, we no longer see these structural levels. All we've got are the architectural ones. Now, you might also wonder why this one doesn't appear. And the reason for that is because these levels, or the offset lines, were not in the offset that we just closed. They're in a different one. Now, let's also go take a look at the structural plan. And as you can see here, we no longer see the grids. So that's how it works. You can very easily make them invisible. Also, if you notice that you have missed some things, then that's because those items were definitely not inside the workset that you've closed. You're gonna have to go over here and open the structural file and check to see what the problem was that doesn't make these items show. It's either because of their worksets, or maybe they're part of the waffle links here, and stuff like that. Now let's go check this out together. And here we are. So you see the levels that we can see on this part in the architectural file. Let's go check their workset. It's workset 1. So I'm going to change that workset to what I've closed. And then I'm going to synchronize this file to also apply these changes to the central file. And after that, I'm going to go over here and once again, I'm going to reload it. Let's go into an elevation, where we can see that those levels that were visible here by mistake are no longer visible. So this way you could also control the visibility of some of your items. And also this is what we usually do for our projects in Revit. We just basically close the grids and levels worksets in the linked file, which also you just saw that the worksets can be separate. Now also you might wonder what you should do if your file isn't central. You might not even have any worksets to close. You see, if you haven't worked on the central file and haven't linked any files, then you won't have the Manage Worksets option in this window. Then you won't be able to open or close any worksets. So what should you do in that case is, like, if you don't have a central file, what can you do to make the grids and the levels invisible? That's actually very easy. You could just open the view and press VG, and then go over to the Revit Links tab. And then you're going to edit this and change it to custom. Then you're going to go into this tab and change this one to custom as well. And then you're going to uncheck the visibility for your grids. Alright, click OK and that'll turn off your grids in the plan. And you could also do that for your levels and elevations. Now you might think to yourself that this way you will have to go over to every single view and do that same thing over and over again. But here's a tip, you won't need to. You see, in all of our projects, we've got a view template. For example, for the measuring plans, we have one template, and another template for the flooring, and another template for the elevations. In fact, we have a separate template for each series of documents, which you could go into those templates and make your grids and levels invisible in there. That way you won't have to go into every single view, then to the Revit links to make the grids and levels invisible. And actually, I'm gonna give you a quick example to help you understand it better. So I'm gonna open a new project. And I'm just gonna draw a few random grids. Something like that. Okay, and also this file isn't central. So now I'm gonna save this. And for its name, I'm gonna put, for example, test. Now I'm gonna close this. Then I'm going to go over here and open a whole nother project. And I'm going to link that previous file into here. I'm going to select the test file and link it into the project. So you see, now we've got the grids. Also, our file isn't central, like if I go over here and right-click, the Manage Worksets is off. So now what am I going to do? I'm going to open VG, then go to Revit Links, then set this one to Custom, then also in the Annotation tab, we're going to make the categories Custom, and then we're going to look through the list to uncheck the visibility for the grids, and turn them off like this. Now you might also wonder if you need to go into every single view and do the same thing over and over again, which, like I said, you wouldn't need to. You see, if you do that, for example, I just did it for this level 1 over here, But in level 2, we still have those grids. But you could right click on the first one, then create a view template from it. And then you could go over to that level 2 you have to apply that view template to it. We're going to discuss the view templates in full later in the sheet making chapter. But as you can see over here, once I applied it, the grids are gone. So in fact, I've applied the settings that I've adjusted in this view to this other one. I just made a view template from it and then applied it to another level. It's actually very easy, so don't worry if your file isn't central, because you can still manage your levels and grids.